What are they going to say? You haven't really given them a whole lot of options. Okay. So at that point, they're kind of hands tied, and they're going to put you in a situation almost overwhelmingly 100% of the time where now you have a line of communication that you've now opened. Then you start to have relationship. Then you start to have position referrals. So you've got fitness referrals, position referrals. Now let's go youth sports. Youth sports, probably beneficial from a club sports standpoint. Not saying it's not beneficial from a rec standpoint, but if your youth sports organizations are much like ours, club sports are taken over. And you naturally have people that run the organizations that are a little bit more invested. And you naturally have coaches, because there's a little bit more monetary value behind what the kids are paying for, that are trying to add to the experience. So it's a perfect time to either do in-person or online workshops or webinars. You could be going to practice. You could be doing a dynamic warm-up for the kids. You could be doing a warm-up across the program that potentially you're pairing with videos and with some kind of like PDF for everybody to follow. You could be talking about injury prevention principles. You could be doing a coaches workshop or a coaches seminar for one of the programs locally. There's a coaches webinar that I've been on Sunday nights where I'm talking to the coaches, potentially doing Q&As. So there's a lot of different ways for anybody that wants to look at what we do for a coaches program, and everybody's in front of their computer right now. Go to rehabtoreform.com/Maryland United. It's MD United. And the thing that I forgot too is the concierge line and then consult nights. So we've set up all of this. Is everybody, it works? rehabtoreform.com/MD United. Okay. And you can do this obviously at your particular places. Consult nights, they'll send out a message to the parents, and the coaches show up, be on the practice field, and kids are getting shuttled over during practice time to get consults for little nagging injuries, or potentially there's a time where they're sidelined for a little bit, and it's an opportunity to get direct access to a medical professional on their time, meeting them where they're at. We've had athletes over for mobility and recovery workshops at some of our facilities where they come over right at the end. We usually close the office at 7. They usually come over at about 7:15, and they go through a 45-minute session, typically after long tournament weekends. Concierge line, cell phone goes out. I get messages from parents that want to get on the phone. They don't want to wait 2 weeks to get in to see somebody. They want to know what's going on right now, what they could potentially be doing, and whether or not what's going on with their child is something that needs immediate care. A lot of time that ends up turning into me working with the front desk to get them seen immediately. There's the educational content piece. A lot of these places will have newsletters. So if you could potentially put content in their newsletter, it could give you that thought leadership. Again, creating that top of mind awareness in this particular area. Open access to R2P facility. Potential internship opportunities for the high school kids, and then obviously that coach, parent, player education piece. But we create websites like this for the organizations of which that we have partnerships with. Thoughts, questions? Perfect. We do similar things for the schools that we work with. The other things that I would add for schools, sometimes you're going to, and actually the youth sports, sometimes putting some kind of monetary sponsorship behind it is valuable. Potentially they have a big play day that you could set up a booth at. Presence is good, making sure that you are out there and meeting people where they're at. At the schools, a big thing that I like to do is career days. So it's a really, really good way to get a relationship with guidance counselor. It's a really good way if you're struggling to get to the AD to show up there and potentially at the end of the day, ask if you can meet the athletic director. But doing career days gets you in front of kids. It's kind of the path line to the profession. You get to communicate the profession to young people who may be interested in it. And at the end of the day, this has been awesome for us also to develop a high school intern program that then turns into a college intern program. And then naturally, you also have parents that are there, teachers that are there that end up coming to your place. You have coaches that are there that end up sending people over. So if you're talking about getting involved in the ecosystem of a school and a local community, career days are a great way to get involved and put yourself as more of that community facing business. Then business, I mean, there's networking groups, there's Rotary, there's Chamber of Commerce. Really depends on what you want to get involved in. A lot of times in Chamber of Commerce, there's like little population groups that you can jump into, like a health and wellness committee. The Rotary is a good place to potentially put yourself in a situation where you're interacting with nonprofits. There's also, just nonprofits that you might be interested in or have a passion for. And, again, volunteer is just a great way to become a part of a community. And then what am I missing? Youth sports, tactical athlete. Sometimes that's a little bit tougher. It's a little bit harder to have a direct line to some of those communities. But we've been successful now at getting involved in the biggest thing, police recruits, as they go through their academy process. We've been able to get up there and deliver talks to that patient population group. So does anybody have any questions about that? It's kind of like the big, like, social capital ecosystem. You don't have to do all that, but you might just think differently about the buckets in which you can kind of insert yourself in the community. And the thing that I always say, try to find ways to add value, right? Just meet people where they're at, add value, have minimal asks, decrease friction for people coming to interact with you. And you'll be surprised what that turns into. Thoughts?
I'm just trying to think of ways. So kind of going back to the fitness bucket, because part of like a potential role that I'm working on developing into in my company is like a director of education and outreach type of role, where we're part of that responsibility is starting to do a little bit more community outreach. And so kind of thinking about how I could potentially spearhead some of these potential opportunities and connections. I'm just trying to think of kind of like where to start and how, I guess, some of the people at R2P that have gone to some of these fitness communities and boxes and things like that, how they've kind of, I guess, initiated that conversation about like, this is what I want to provide, as opposed to just like, oh, like I'm a physical therapist and I can talk about physical therapy. Like, what are some of those conversations that your employees have had success with?
At the organizations where they're delivering a workshop, or with me?
Like at the organization. So say like my CrossFit gym, like I'm building relationships and I want to enter that realm and potentially like talk to them about hosting a workshop. How are some of the ways that your employees have had success, like getting people on board with that type of
situation? Are you developing connectivity with the coaches at the CrossFit box you're at, or the owner?
More so the coaches. I haven't seen the owner yet. He owns a Cairo office right next door, but I don't go during the hours that he actually coaches.
Would you feel comfortable talking to one of the coaches and just kind of saying, hey, look, I would love to, I'm here. I love it here. I'd love to find a way to share some of my professional self with, your population, with your community here. Would you like to do a dual workshop? Because sometimes that might be less of an issue where, and especially if you're collaborating on something with somebody there, it could be a nice first step in the door. So you could be doing something for lift, a particular lift. You could do like a lift workshop, or typically body part. I think from a CrossFit standpoint, that would go over really, really well. So you're potentially doing squat, you're doing snatch, you're doing clean. It could be a bar work session, but you kind of peel back the layers in terms of the preparation for those tasks, things you've seen, issues you've seen, potentially auxiliary or supportive lifts. But I think working with that other individual, and you also give them the ability to say no, and say, you know what, I'd rather have just you do it. But if you go in directly and it's just you and it doesn't look like you're trying to collaborate, I would argue that the intent to collaborate potentially is going to decrease barriers for you. And you'd be more likely to get a yes, or you'd be more likely to have somebody just say, why don't you just come and do it yourself? As opposed to potentially just going and doing it yourself, not looking like you want to collaborate. And then you never allow that person to have the ability to say, hey, I'd love to do it with you.
Right. No,
it's a little different, but it's, you got to hit at people's psychology a little bit.
Yeah. Those subtle marks make a big difference.
What do you think? Does that help?
Yeah, that's very helpful. I think because it's hard I just like think a lot about, because that's some things I've been talking with one of my colleagues about as well. Because we see a lot of military at my clinic, and he's 4 months
Perfect.
with me, and he works very closely with a lot of the military patients that we see. And I think that he's discussed with our boss potentially doing some workshops as well
Okay.
with that population.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of thinking on ways that I could potentially help spearhead, but also like offer insight to like him, and we can like kind of have this big back and forth dialogue of like the best ways to go about this from people that have had success.
Yeah. I mean, did that help you, or do you want like more? I think
No, that's
sometimes,
definitely
yeah,
helpful.
you could do collaborative content. You could do collaborative video content with that patient population base and kind of put it in a closed YouTube playlist. You could create some kind of resource or step through or some kind of new way of warming up, or but eventually, you're trying to gauge your relationship. You're trying to gauge the level of trust. But I do think a collaborative workshop for the first one typically is very, very well received. It's hard for people to say no, especially because they could potentially already be delivering workshops already.
Yeah, I really like the collaboration aspect. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, 30, 45 minutes, but then Q&A and you open it up. But I would always get some kind of sign up ahead of time, get emails,
Hmm.
and then I would always follow up with emails, because now you just hit 3 touch points. You send an introductory email, set the expectation, tell a little bit about yourself and the company, crush the workshop, follow up, and now you're 1/3 of the way to what we typically people need like 9 impressions to make a decision that they're going to choose to go somewhere new.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
And then the consult piece, make sure the place that you're at's like okay with consults. And then you talk to the front desk and it's like, oh, hey, people might be calling in for about a month here potentially to do consults with me. Just let me know, 30 minutes, put it in a case note. That's how we, put it in a case note in WebPT. It's no treatment, it's just conversation, potentially providing a couple of, tidbits of advice, recommendations. And you're trying to communicate the value that they would be provided by making a choice to work with you. Anybody thoughts? Okay. So that's social capital piece. Feel free to do that on your own. Again, that's probably the biggest way for people to go into an operation. If you never want to open a business, still deliver value to a company, be valuable, have somebody take note of your value, and start to have to think forward about your career and how it ties into the company. The company direction has to be accounted for as a result of this person, because if we lose this person, we know that it's going to take a hit on what it is that we have going on. Now, then you have the financial side of things. I mean, just understanding how business works, assuming everybody's remotely, like personally, financially literate. I know it's tough to be in a situation where you're just out of school or you're in school and you're juggling finances. You're trying to figure out what's the best decision for yourself. I do think that your 20s is a time to definitely do a little bit extra, even, early 30s, depending on what you have from a extra hours standpoint. Some people start their family a little bit younger. It might be a little bit more challenging. But during that time period where you don't yet have little ones to worry about and concern yourself with in your off hours, might not be a bad idea to just pick up extra work.